Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah, over 80% of people who identify with the LGBTQ plus community have been sexually assaulted in their past, often in childhood. I myself started to battle with feelings of attraction towards women.
I don't know if you've ever been severely depressed. Maybe you've suffered abuse. It is an awful thing to go through, but today's conversation is going to be a hard one. It's an important conversation, and we need to have this conversation, and I think that we can't talk about these issues enough because I guarantee more people suffer from these things than we give credit to. So, welcome, Mariank, to LED Live. Glad to have you on our show.
Thank you so much, Scotty. I'm glad to be here.
And I'm glad that you're willing to come on and be honest and talk about some of these things that you've had to go through in life. But the reason we want to talk about this is there is hope. There's hope at the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's right.
And that's what you're going to hear today. So, Mariank, tell us a little bit about growing up. You've grown up in the United States a little bit, or are you from another country?
Well, my parents are both from Colombia. They met in the States. I was born and raised in Florida. I grew up in Apopka in Central Florida. That's a little bit northwest of Orlando. I have a very interesting family dynamic, I guess. Like you could say, like there are unique things with the age gaps. For example, my dad's quite older. My mom wanted to marry him and he just went with it, kind of thing. Not your typical background story for a family. But I was raised in a low-income area in Apopka. I guess I had a lot of like ghetto influence. I don't know if maybe people could see that in some sides of me, but like get me in the right environment and my ghetto side will come out.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
Now describe the family dynamics, because you said your father is actually quite much older than your mom. Just how what's that age gap?
32 years.
32 years. That is a good age gap.
Yeah. Not everyone can say that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have siblings?
Yeah. Yes. So my father from a previous marriage had 2 sons. So I have 2 older half brothers. And then my mother from a previous relationship at a wedlock had my sister, older half sister, on my mom's side, 2 older half brothers on my dad's side.
But the closest one in age to you is how far of a distance?
My sister, about 11 and a half years older.
Okay, so there's quite a span of kids' ages in the house. I mean, some are grown up and left. But you grew
Definitely.
up, 11 years is enough for you to be almost like an only child.
Yeah, it was basically like that, yeah. I was basically an only child. I'm the only one from both my parents at the same time. I don't have any full siblings. And over summer vacation, we would go and visit my mom's side of the family in Colombia, and that's where I would spend time with my sister. That's my sister. She was actually raised by my mother's parents. She was taken away from my mother by her parents when my sister was 3 years old.
So they took the child away because just based on my grandmother's judgment. I mean, I'm sure she didn't think that my mother would be a fit mother for my sister, so she, took her away and raised her herself. Now, your mom, you were sharing with me, is kind of interesting because your name Mariank. Describe why your mom married a couple concepts together for your name. What is that?
Yeah. So, she mashed up the Egyptian Ankh. It's like the popular pop culture Egyptian symbol with it's like a cross with a loop at the top, quite popular. It's spelled Ankh. She lopped the H off and she mashed it up with the name Mariana. So Mariana Ankh, Mariank.
Love it. So your
Yeah.
mom was into spiritualism a bit.
A lot of spiritualism, a lot of New Age, tarot cards, angels and aliens and crystals and
Did she ever meet any of them and talk with the spirits or talk with the angels? Do you know?
I've never really personally really quite talked to her about that, but I would overhear a lot of phone conversations that she'd have with her other New Age friends, and they would talk a lot about that stuff. And I'm sure, yeah, she had her own personal experience with that in that.
So did you have any kind of Christianity influence in the house at all?
So my father, he was raised Roman Catholic, just like my mother was. It's like I'd say any Hispanic country is very heavily steeped into Roman Catholicism because of Spain, as well as New Age and a lot of maybe you can have like some witchcraft in there sometimes, or superstition especially. A lot of carrying over from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
My father, he didn't really like settle well with like the whole doctrines of Roman Catholicism though. And when he moved to the States, he lived for some time in California, and there he met an Adventist couple who showed him biblical truth, and he converted to Adventism and raised being Adventist.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So you were starting to get some of these influences, but there was still some troubling things that were happening in your home. What was going on between your mom and you and your home situation at this point?
So my mother was raised by my grandparents in a very broken home. My grandmother was very spiritually, emotionally, physically abusive to all of her daughters, including my mother. And to her firstborn son, he was the golden child. He could do no wrong in her eyes.
There's usually one that they'll gravitate to, and the rest of them get the short end of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so my mother did go through a lot growing up, but she never resolved it.
Mm-hmm.
She never healed. And as far as I can observe with her, having no peace, no temperance, developing an abusive demeanor herself, I don't think she had a genuine relationship with God. I still pray for her. I wish she would, and that she'd find healing and peace in Jesus. But yeah, she's physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually just unstable. And because she didn't resolve the different things she grew up with, and traumas and things like that, she passed it on to me, even if she didn't try. She was very physically in some ways, and spiritually definitely, and emotionally abusive to me and to my dad. Yeah.
So how did you kind of get around or out of that? What was going on? Did you have to leave the house, or was this getting worse and worse and worse?
So when I was about 6, 7, 8 years old, she had to leave for Colombia for a while to do a lot of surgeries because she has like a lot of health conditions. And so she went to Colombia, and she's like, okay, I'll be back next month. And I would be, talking to her, and I was pretty close to her when I was smaller. It's like, oh, mommy, when are you coming back? And then the next month became the next month, and then next year, and then next few years. And so it was basically my dad being a single dad raising me.
Wow.
Not knowing how to raise a daughter,
right.
And so my dad did the best he could, but I felt very neglected, especially by my mother. And I didn't have a good, like, female role model to look up to teach me things. My dad would be the one to discipline me, and he did the best he could to also be nurturing
The
as well.
nurturing one.
Yeah. And that's if he could be present, so like it's but and so I believe I perhaps tried to look for family elsewhere because I wasn't getting that at home. And so I made friends with neighbors, friends at school. Then I would go over to their house and spend a lot of time with them. And I think over the years, I spent so much time with my friends that I even, I felt like I got to know them better, and they were more of a family to me than even my own family, and that even my own family knew me.
So it was like kind of like, you're looking through a window going, here's a family right here. I want to be a part of this family, but you're still just the neighbor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And then those friends ended up being toxic friends.
They started abusing you.
They started abusing me.
Oh no. Were they male friends? Male neighbors?
Male and female.
Male and female.
And the abuse started like since I was 6 years old.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And continued on throughout, your upbringing. Did you live in the same house all the way through high school and wow.
Yeah. So my first set of toxic friends was a sister and a brother with a single mom, who their dad was abusive and she had left him. And so once I found out about that, I figured perhaps that's why they were also being toxic to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was, I would come over to their house and they would like demean me. They wouldn't even like let me sit on the couch. They would treat me like a dog and have me sit crisscross on the floor on the rug, watch whatever was on the TV, whether it was child appropriate or not, news or adult shows or whatever. They would tell me what to do, and if I didn't do it quickly enough for them or at the right time, they would physically harm me.
Oh, wow.
They would always put me down verbally, like, oh, you're so annoying, or, oh, shut up, like, you don't have anything valuable to say or whatever. And the girl was 4 years older than I was, and the boy was 3 years older than I was. So at 6, he was like 9 and she was 10, and then this progressed until I was 10, and their mother ended up remarrying and they ended up moving away. But they would even, I was 6, 7 years old, they would even, sit me down in front of the TV, watch, and they would watch all these horror movies, and they would force me to watch these horror movies with them. And to this day, I still remember the movies and certain scenes.
Isn't that crazy? Like, some kids are free to watch whatever they want. And some of these things are downright scary. I mean, can give you lifelong phobias of the dark, or of, there's something out there that's going to get me, or, did you have trouble sleeping after seeing some of those?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've come across people who, started seeing shadow people and, had really physical manifestations, and they had just opened themselves up to watching all these horrible horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where's your dad in all this? Did you have an opportunity to share with him, or was this just like you couldn't tell anybody what was really going on?
Yeah, so they would be like, if you tell your parents, we're going to beat you up, and they were already physically abusing me, and I didn't want it to get worse. And I was deathly afraid of them beating me up. And I guess I didn't even develop a strong trust relationship with my parents, because if I were to have done that, I'm sure I would have trusted that they could protect me. And so I would have gone to them and said, hey, this is what's going on. I don't like this. And then they could have, done something about it and protected me. But I, in my mind, gave more power to my toxic friends than I gave to my parents.
Wow.
And therefore, I kept quiet, and the abuse kept the abuse kept moving forward without my parents even knowing about it.
Oh, wow. And so did this kind of follow you into your high school days? And, it seems that people that are abused seem to have a sign on their head and attract abusers to continue that down the road. Have you had that kind of similar experience as well?
Yeah, I would always be bullied in school, from elementary school to high school, for being fat and therefore ugly and incompetent at everything. And I had few, true friends, and usually some of the teachers would take pity on me and help me out and be friendly. But
kids can be mean.
No filter mean. And it's like, what a hard time already to grow up, and you've got all these different changes that are happening, and these different social groups that you're trying to figure out where you fit in. And if you don't quite fit in there, how does that make you feel going to school every day? Like I didn't belong, like, no matter what I did. I couldn't find safety or belonging or acceptance or love no matter what I did. Wow. I think when you talk about, having a sign on your head, like, I think as I've looked into, like, the dynamics of abuse and things like that and the effects of it, if you have a survivor that has gone through it, but they haven't healed from their victim state of mind, an abuser can easily pick up on that. Like, they can see, oh, here are signs of lack of confidence, fear, sadness, hyper vigilance of doing something wrong, because trauma overwhelms the nervous system, by the way. And lack of boundaries, I'd say, would be one of the biggest things. One of the biggest things, for sure. And so I think that, and so throughout school, my closest friends are often toxic. And so I think that because of my influence from my upbringing, from my mother being so toxic, emotionally, physically, spiritually abusive to me, I had these signs, and not, to everyone else, but I never developed boundaries. I never learned how to do that. My mother had no boundaries. And whatever she wanted, she demanded it. It was her way or no way. She would go to great lengths to get whatever she would want. There were no boundaries. It was very, very, very unhealthy. And so I think that's why I developed those toxic friends that were neighbors, those toxic friends at school. And I didn't cut off all my toxic relationships until late into my teenage years. And I even had to get help from my non-toxic friends for that.
How did you get away from all of this? Like, what was your turning point that began to heal these really broken relationships that you were starting to build?
Well, I couldn't find much respite or reprieve. My dad taught me about God. He would drag me to church with him every week.
So how did your views of God, obviously God being a father and a parent, was this tainting the way you felt about God? Like, if you're up there and you're not helping me, what are you doing? Were you angry at God?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like, it was very, the cold, distant relationship with God. Like my philosophy as a child growing up when it came to God was that, okay, I can accept Jesus and his sacrifice for my sins, and I can go to heaven if I were to keep all the 10 commandments in my own strength.
Mm.
So I was essentially like a little Pharisee trying to do everything in my own strength. And then the only time I would pray would be for forgiveness of my sins if I were to break one of those 10 commandments.
Mm. Mm.
And so morality, like I did what was right in my own eyes. Like I thought that I was baptized at the age of 10, thinking that sin was doing drugs and openly worshiping the devil and breaking the 10 commandments. That's literally all that I thought sin was. Boy, did I not know much of anything at that point, of course. I think that it's great for children to get baptized, but I think that if they, learn more and have a groundbreaking experience where it's like a whole new layer of their relationship with God that they never had before,
can solidify their decision that they're making.
Yeah,
because all too often, you're in such a different place when you're 12 years old than when you are when you're 18.
Oof, yeah.
And, a lot of times people that made that decision, I was one of those that made it at 12 years old. I mean, I really was genuinely, wanting to follow God. And then all of a sudden, 18, I'm, out the door and had to have no time for God. And so I agree with you. I think, baptism is such an important step to really say, I'm all in with you, God, and I want you a part of every facet of my life.
Definitely.
And I think that
quite a beginning.
With age and experience comes that decision in more strength.
For sure. But as a teen later on, I wanted to get rebaptized because of actually accepting a relationship with Jesus. So I guess I'll get to that soon. But yeah, definitely. Amen. And so, yeah, I ended up turning to a junk food for comfort food. I ended up turning to just, spending a lot of time alone, watching a lot of TV, a lot of movies, and then, getting sucked into video games. I was a severe addict.
Wasted hours and hours on those things.
Yeah, I wouldn't sleep, eat, use the bathroom. Like, I was just sucked in. Like, I really wanted an escape from what was going on in my life. And whenever I considered God, I had this disconnect where, okay, Jesus saved me from my sins, but I have no savior from where I'm at right now. And so,
so where did that connect actually begin to start to happen? You talked before we got involved in this conversation that, you were ready to end it. What part of your life were you in that space?
Really wanted to end it was when my mom finally decided to come back when I was 15, almost 16. And then, her abuse just got more and more severe after that. A peer from high school shared with me the Glenn Kuhn and the ABCs of Prayer and those sermons. And so as I listened to those sermons, I saw the character of God as a loving, selfless parent. And then, because at that point I was so depressed about everything and I was so tired about keeping this religion that just restrained me, I decided to become an atheist.
Wow.
And so then after, giving the shot of giving it a chance in listening to those sermons and seeing the character and love of God, I felt Jesus speak to my heart and offer to have a relationship with me. And I'm like, okay, now this is the real deal. It's not about me trying to do everything perfectly in my own strength. It's about holistically accepting Jesus into every part of that. And so I said yes. And right when I said yes, I got all these insights from the Holy Spirit in like wisdom in life, and like all the hard things I've been through. God has been sharing his wisdom through as a fruit of all of of all of those hardships.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I don't think that God puts us in those situations. I don't think he's orchestrating saying, okay, I want Mariank to go through this awful abuse situation so she'll come out on the other end. But God can take an awful situation, and when you have that encounter with Jesus and you really do meet him and you see, this is what this is about. He actually does love me. He actually cares about me. And that's all you're seeking anyway. That's why this kind of a thing just breaks my heart. I want to talk to you guys for a second about, why we do what we do at Little Light Studios and the support that you guys share with our ministry, because it's literally this type of a thing that we want to share with the world out there. There's so many people that need an encounter with Jesus. Thank you guys for Patreon donors that keep our ministry going, the support. It takes money to make these programs. I know, and I've met so many people that have had real world experiences and have had some awakenings and some lives changed from the content that's come out of this ministry. So I just wanted to thank you guys. And if you want, please consider supporting this ministry so we can continue this work forward. But I wanted to kind of hang on that a little bit. When you meet Jesus, it's like everything else just begins to make sense.
Yes.
Even the abuse that you experience, it's like you can kind of understand we live in a broken world, and you almost begin to look at people like I pity the person that doesn't have that realization of Jesus in their life,
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about that moment that you really did just, it was like a light bulb coming on.
Well, I think that really like came over time when I, just, processed the things that I've gone through, and I thought about like others more and their suffering, and it's like, man, how did people make it without a relationship with Jesus? Like, and then I go through that myself more in my journey, but I really wanted to end my life for the first time at around that time when Jesus offered to have a relationship with me, and I said yes. I was really depressed at the time, and I'm like, okay, I won't end my life because of my relationship with Jesus. And I was tempted to do, self-harm, do all these other things. And I think the physical abuse I underwent may have been, the difficulty may have been amplified because my pain was amplified. I have this condition, this hypersensitivity to physical pain I've had ever since I could remember. So I have early childhood memories of, at school, we were like, on this field trip at this jungle gym or whatever, and then there were, kids like climbing on this rope thing. And so I tried to climb on, and it hurt, it hurt my hands. Yeah. And I'm like, ow. And then like I had to keep doing it because everyone else was doing it. I'm like, ow, this is torture. And then there was another girl, and she, in a more vulgar way, said something along the lines of, what are you talking about? Torture. This is fun. That's like, what? And so I realized that wasn't normal, the amount of pain I was feeling. And so when I would be, punched, have my hair pulled, scratched, even just be physically abused for the pleasure of my toxic friends. It's like that hurt more than like, another child who would have a normal sense of pain would perceive. And, still, for everyone going through that, it is terrible. It is traumatizing, physically, emotionally, spiritually, when people say, oh, believe what I tell you or you're going to be condemned forever. And then, they twist like your spiritual worldviews and things like that. And then they try to get a grip on you that way. So January is actually Spiritual Abuse Awareness Month, and I recently learned that. Just like how September is Suicide Awareness Month as well. Yeah, so anyway, the other type of abuse is sexual abuse. And I think that really ties into harming the identity of the person.
And this first began with the neighbors that you were living next door to.
Yeah, and I'd say my mother did some things to me that I was pretty uncomfortable with in that room when I was a young child as well. I hope she didn't mean it, but yeah, definitely from the toxic neighbors, sexually abused, sexually assaulted, from different friends that I would make and meet, different family friends that we had at different points of visiting. Like, I was born in Miami, we would visit Miami every so often. In Colombia, there was a neighbor, a friend that I had, but then his older brother, sexually abused me. And then it's so sad when, people that you trust, especially if it's a family member, molests you, sexually assaults you, like it really, I feel it really attacks on your identity. And so, especially being sexually abused by boys and girls, men and women.
Yeah, it's like, who can you trust at this point?
Who can you trust?
It's everybody, yeah.
And then how your body responds too. Because your body is built to respond, and even though you don't want to engage, your body is forced to engage. And so there has to be healing done from that. But with the pain that comes from that, I know that there's been a lot of rise in the LGBTQ plus community and movements, being, following their heart, following their feelings, feeling like they need to be true to themselves and live out how they feel on the inside.
So did this begin to really play with your head? I mean, obviously now identity is a huge, topic, and, you hear these stories over and over and over again. And when you really sit these kids down, or people that are struggling with that, you talk about their past, many of them have a similar experience.
Yeah, over 80% of people who identify with the LGBTQ plus community have been sexually assaulted in their past, often childhood. And I'd say 100% of them have experienced trauma, because I've made good friends with a few of them, and maybe, several of them, and all of them have been through traumatic experiences. The trauma and the disconnect on the identity there is, as I see it, they may not perceive it as that being a fruit of that. But the way I see it is that there is this inner brokenness. There is this, questioning of identity. One of the Q letters is questioning in that acronym.
Right.
In that group of letters there. And I myself started to battle with feelings of attraction towards women. And so I never openly came out as bisexual. I never truly identified with being bisexual. I mean, I've thought about it, but like I recognize that there must be some kind of brokenness in there, because as I got to know Jesus more, and I got to see how Jesus designed things to be, and that's where we get our maximum long-lasting freedom and pleasure, and like a plant getting water for the first time in a long time. Like, this is what I was made for, so anything outside of that is something that the enemy tries to throw at you to trap you and separate you from him. And then in the end, you just get stabbed in the back by that.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're heading to a good thing, but and the end
It's
therein
just
is destruction.
Stumbling down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just breaks my heart, to think that a lot of kids are subject to this, unawares to the parents.
Yes.
I'm just guessing that your dad had probably had no clue what you were dealing with, and this is a common story that keeps happening again and again and again. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, and we my wife and I made the decision early on. Our kids do not spend the time in people's homes that we don't know, and no overnight stays and things like that. We've done hopefully a decent job trying to protect them, and that's not always a 100% fail-safe plan either. But yeah, the devil knows that if he can mess with your sexuality, he can mess with your spirituality. Those two things are so oftenly interlinked together.
Definitely.
And so, it really took an encounter with Jesus for you to start to unwind that.
Yes.
And be like, this is what a real relationship should look like.
Yes.
Because you've got all these patterns of these broken relationships, and ultimately those things can impact the way that you view God.
100%.
And so I'm very pleased to see that you have had an encounter with Jesus, and that you didn't quite, just reject him ultimately, and you actually opened your heart and gave him an opportunity to come into your heart.
Amen.
So tell me a little bit about that. When you decided to give Jesus a try, what happened after that?
Well, yeah, so definitely with the nuggets of wisdom, the realizations I would make, and then so like I would share them on Facebook. And then I feel like I'm just like sharing a quote from like a Greek philosopher, or like, someone ancient and famous or whatever, like known for their like wisdom and stuff. But I always, try to give the credit and glory to God, because that could not have come from me on my own at all. Yeah. And so I started to, see God's love more, and that, that it wasn't his will that all these terrible things had happened to me. But now that they have, because, of freedom of choice, he had to let some things happen to me, some things happen to people. And I understand, asking God why. Or, if God is so good, then why would he let such terrible, terrible things happen? But the reality is that we live in a great controversy.
That's right.
And so the more I looked into that great controversy between Jesus Christ and Satan, the arch enemy, I could see, okay, we are on a trial, and it's God's character on trial. God always gives us the freedom of choice. He allowed sin to happen. He is just in his love, and so there will be an end to this. But in the meantime, sin has to come to its full fruition. And so, okay, yeah, it's pretty ugly. But we've got to see it in its full ugliness. And so that's why it says in the Bible, sin will never rise a second time, because we've seen
we know where that
looks like.
That road leads right there.
We don't want that. Despite how badly we were deceived, we came to and were woken up in the light of the truth. What God shows us, that leads to death, and that he wants what is best for us. He knows us the best. He loves us the most and cares about us the most and wants to help us the most, and is more than capable of healing us and making a good making good out of our lives. And so therefore he has the best plan for our lives. And so but before really letting Jesus into my heart, I would share with my friends and other people about God, but I was trying to keep everything in my own strength. And if you were my close friend and I cared about you, I would try to shove my religion down your throat. And I was wondering, why my friends didn't want to hang out with me. Yeah, those would be the ones that wouldn't, try to be toxic to me. So all my healthy friends, I pushed away by being toxic to them. And I was starting to be toxic, manipulative, even physically abusing them. And then when I saw that in myself, I'm like, yeah, no, I probably should not do that.
We talked a little bit about generational curses before, and this is something that you had mentioned, that there was multiple generational things that had happened in your family, and you saw these patterns. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's addictions, like my mother enjoyed drinking alcohol. She smoked for a very long time. She even smoked in front of me, so I unknowingly got secondhand smoking, and I'm suffering physical consequences and repercussions probably because of that. Currently dealing with peripheral neuropathy in my feet, and now starting in my hands at the age of 24.
Yeah, you're too young. Yeah.
Like usually people in their 60s and 70s get that disease, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty young, but yeah, it just goes to show that anybody of any age can get any disease. But yeah, so I think that when there are addictions in a family and going through the generations, there can become a tendency toward those certain addictions. With genetics and genes, there's you've heard of epigenetics, I'm sure. Yeah, so certain genes are
you can
turned
rewrite the
on and
DNA.
off. Yeah, exactly. You can rewrite the DNA by turning certain genes on and off. By those genes are turned on and off by certain environmental factors or certain thinking processes and things like that. So that's really neat that no, you can't control everything about your genes, but there is that part of the genes, the epigenetics, where you do have some influence in that if you want to change something about something you may have inherited that you don't want, like a certain tendency to a certain addiction. Like for me, I've become very intemperate and overeating and indulging in things like that because of my mother, and I took after her in those areas. And so I've worked on that, and in Christ have been gaining victory in that and been in recovery from that, and other things. Like I've gotten into a lot of addictions, mostly behavioral addictions, like video games, as I've mentioned before, friends in the past, the toxic ones especially, introduced me to pornography and self-abuse. People call self-abuse masturbation, right? Which those have taken people by storm. A lot of men for sure, but I'd say a lot of women struggle with that as well.
A lot of women these days.
I was one of them. Yeah. Yeah. It's, readily accessible. And again, it's also something that attacks you in your sexuality and therefore as well in your spirituality. And so I'm also in recovery of that. 3 years in recovery. Praise the Lord for that.
Amen.
Victory over those things for sure. And so it's so there's addictions, and then it can be generationally passed on, even just with the epigenetics. And there's also for domestic violence and abuse, it also gets passed on, just like with what happened with my mother. She herself was born and raised in a very broken home. Her eldest brother, my grandparents' eldest son, the firstborn son. So sons are wonderful in Hispanic culture, but the firstborn, wow. Yeah. And so he was the golden child for my grandmother. In her eyes, he could do no wrong. And so he would often like do something, but instead of getting in trouble, he would blame it on his sisters, including my mother being one of them. Yeah. Yeah. And so even if they were innocent and they would, plead for their innocence, my grandma would be like, oh, why did you do this? No, you're lying. And then she would punish them. And not just with corporate punishment, but like with straight up like hitting you wherever on the body, physical abuse. Like my dad told me that in his days growing up in Colombia, if you were to badmouth, disrespect your parent, they would have every right to punch you in the mouth and knock your teeth out.
Wow.
Every right to.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Respect is pretty huge for us in Colombia. We're very intense all around. So I feel like I can be pretty intense, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's a generational thing. Yeah, I don't know. But I can learn to maybe cultivate a positive side of that, have intense, compassion and kindness for people instead of, succumbing to intense negative emotions that the enemy tries to attack.
You're recognizing that there's some abuses that are happening in your life, and that you don't want to repeat those things.
Right. Yeah.
And
break the cycle.
Yeah, you're breaking the cycle. And so once you decided to kind of like break that cycle and really focus on your relationship with Jesus, what did that do for your moods and your, were you finding like joy in life again?
Well, I stuck a lot with my addictions, thinking that they were okay, that they weren't harming me, that this is a harmless way to de-stress from the stresses of life. But I wasn't noticing at all how they were affecting me in the long term or harming me in the long term. I didn't really work on my relationship with Jesus a whole lot. Like I would just have epiphanies and go to church and things would be nice, have some nice Christian songs to get through rough times, but I never really read the Bible for myself. I've never read it cover to cover before, and I've met several people who have, and not that doing good things in your relationship will with God will get you saved or make you holier or whatever. It's for your own benefit. It's you do that out of as a response, as a fruit out of your relationship with Jesus, out of your love for him because you want to spend time with him as your friend, as your best friend, So I didn't have that frontal lobe engagement. I think I was too lulled in my addictions and in my traumas and not healing from the abuse I've been through to really engage with Jesus in that way. And the frontal lobe is where we connect with God.
Right.
So no wonder the enemy is using everything
to
media,
try to
food, pharmaceutical industry, abuse, addictions, everything to lull our frontal lobes to try to get us disconnected from God as much as possible. And to become animalistic,
base passions, and
base
just
passions,
reacting off of the way that you feel. And that's a lot of programming that, think of kids growing up on TV and all the cartoons and everything. That's just like, if it feels good, do it. That's like the MO of our generations, right?
Sadly.
Follow your heart, do whatever feels good to you, and what's right for you might not be right for someone else. I mean, that's just kind of
your truth, their truth.
Yeah.
It's like as though truth were relative.
Yeah.
Mercy.
So was it a struggle at all? You're starting to get your relationship kind of back on track with God. Were there some challenges in there that you were still struggling with?
Yeah, definitely. Like most of my friends were worldly, and and this was, me growing up as a teen, but like as time went on, especially as I was graduating high school, the stronger the grip my mother got onto me. And, I would fall for it. She would, often guilt trip me and talk me out of, moving out, because I wanted to move out to get away from the abuse, but she wanted to keep me there to have her control on me. And so my brother-in-law and my sister, and her 2 daughters, my 2 nieces, they, my sister came and stayed with us for a bit, and met who eventually became her husband, my brother-in-law at the time. And then he decided to move their family to Oklahoma, and so they visited from Oklahoma. I lived in Oklahoma City together at the time, and they saw my situation with my mom, and so they're like, she can't fend for herself as an adult like this. And so they extended their hand to me and offered to take me under their wing. And I accepted. I'm like, oh, praise the Lord, this is the way out. And so with a good dose of adversity, I was actually able to go with them. And I left everything behind, friends, family in Florida. And I moved to live with my sister and my brother-in-law and my nieces in Oklahoma City. To kind of make a long story short for the rest of this, my brother-in-law at the time was no better than my mother. So every effort he put into developing our relationship as brother-in-law and sister-in-law, he was in his 40s. And I was in my late teens. And so he made himself a mentor figure. He taught me good things, but snuck in bad things in there. He would do everything he could to manipulate me. He would isolate me, sleep deprive me, try to intoxicate me with alcohol, and really groom me and manipulate me, and just gain my trust to where I saw him as my best friend in person. I even started to see him as a father figure. But he abused me spiritually, emotionally. He made me feel, slow, weak, and stupid, and just like he would really put me down. And sexually abused me, molest me over a period of time. And this was the period of 6 months before he, it's hard to acknowledge, but my spirit, I want to describe it, was murder. He raped me. And it's like, just like my brother-in-law cheated on my sister with her own sister without any consent. Like, I don't care if it's violent or using coercion. Sex without consent equals rape.
It is.
And so I had a panic attack. I didn't know what to do. I tried to reach out to as many people that I knew from Florida until finally I was able to get in contact with a mentor. I had a lady mentor who was like the mother I never had, who had to move away when I was in high school. And my best friend from high school, his cousin, they worked together to find someone for me to go to. And in the meantime, I was able to go to somewhere else, but my brother-in-law was a frequent and welcome guest, so he manipulated them into turning against me, so I wasn't even trusted, and I was seen as the enemy there in the place where I was supposed to feel safe for refuge. And so I tried going to the YWCA, and they're like, well, if you're not in immediate danger, we can't take you in. Sorry. It's like, okay, well, I mean, my brother-in-law can come at any time in this place where he's a frequent and welcome guest. So I was starting to fear for my life. Because when I confronted him about the things he did, he screamed at me, what you did makes me want to kill you.
Wow.
And later on, I'm like, oh, what about that whole killing me thing? Were you serious about that?
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, you're so immature. You're worried about yourself when you've ruined my life. And I'm like, really?
Oh, wow.
And then I bring it up again, same answer. And it's like, man, like death threats. Like I feel in danger all around. I feel like I have nowhere to go to. So finally I get, this phone number from an Adventist Christian lady who runs a program for women near the whereabouts of Spokane, Washington. And I've never heard of that place before. I'm like, okay, well, I'm willing to go. Like, I've got to go. I've got to get out of here. I can get killed. Like, I don't know what is going to happen next. So I've got to go and get refuge. And so I had the phone interview with her. She accepted me. I went, and about 5.5 years ago, I moved to Spokane, Washington, and I decided to embark on my healing journey and get closer to God in that. And then, yeah, the classes I was, taking, I was able to go to core a few years later. I met church family and developed new friends, chosen family, I'd like to call it. And so maybe we can talk about but I did have a battle with wanting to end my life after everything started to sink in.
And no kid should be experience this. I mean, everybody, when they grow up, they just want to be loved. They just want to give love and, grow up in a family environment that you feel safe at. And here, even in your own family environment, was not safe.
Not at all.
And so it almost seems like every place that you turn has the potential to be a very toxic environment. And but you've made it through that. You're now, out there in Spokane. You got involved in this group that helps women that have been through programs like that. And you got a chance to go to core. Core is a evangelism school that really just trains lay individuals to learn all of the Bible, basic Bible concepts. It's a really cool program so that no matter what field of influence you may go into in life, you have the tools to be able to witness to people, to help people.
Certainly.
Yeah. And so, I'm sure your story is not done being written. So is there any Bible verses that are very impactful to you at this point that maybe somebody that's having a similar experience maybe get some inspiration from?
Yeah, so definitely my life verse is Jonah chapter 2, verse 6, which says, "To the roots of the mountains I sank down, and the earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, have pulled my life up from the pit." And so, just experiencing sinking down to the uttermost, I can't get out of this, I have no hope. But God himself pulled me out and is healing me. And then next time for suicide and that topic, I can continue with that portion of my testimony and then bring the gospel into it with my own struggle with it and with my own research into it and everything like that, as I know that many, many people are also struggling with that too. How I accepted and had hope for the first time that Jesus could heal me, because that was part of it. I had no hope because I felt like I couldn't heal at all. So yeah, definitely Jonah 2 verse 6. I would say that's my life verse.
I think that is absolutely beautiful. And, if you're struggling out there, this might be an opportunity for you to just try and place your eyes solely on Jesus. Maybe something terrible has happened in your life. Maybe a situation that was out of your control has happened. But know that Jesus is the healer. He's the ultimate physician. He can actually take us and set us on the right path and to change that awful situation and to actually begin to reinstill joy into our hearts. And I thank you for being so vulnerable. I thank you for coming on and sharing with us your story. Leave a comment in the section below if you guys want to discuss some of the things that were talked about here. And if you want to look further into some information or something, is there a website to this ladies ministry that you're a part of in Washington?
Not exactly website, but you could look for the program if you'd like help with that and see if that going through that program might be the right fit for you. It's called Women's Healing and Empowerment Network program, WHEN program, WHEN program. There's Sherry Peters with Celebrating Life and Recovery. There's Jennifer Jill Swartzer with the Abide Network, Intimate Clarity. Definitely great resources for working through trauma and domestic violence, and it's healing is a lot of work on our part. It could take, I'd say healing is the work of a lifetime.
Yes.
Just like, justification is the work of a moment. Accepting Jesus. Sanctification is the work of a lifetime. I view sanctification in our walk with Jesus as part of that healing process, healing us back into the image of God.
Well, I think it's beautiful that the tree of life, with its 12 fruits that come on each season, the Bible describes those leaves are for the healing of the nations.
Yes.
And so I know there's a lot of healing that probably all of us need, and the answer is Jesus.
Yes.
And we hope that you were blessed by today's show. Thank you guys so much for supporting this ministry, giving us the opportunity to put pieces of content out into the world like this, and hopefully will alleviate some pressure from somebody somewhere that is going through this very similar experience. So please like and share this content if you know somebody that is maybe struggling with domestic abuse or suicide or even depression, and would love to see the show. We'd love it for you to share it with them. Until then, we'll see you guys next week.
Amen. See ya. Thank you.
There has been very few movies in the history of the world that have completely changed our world. And in 1999, a movie titled The Matrix hit the world stage.
These stories are often told and seen over and over again. Is it simply just to make money? Or is there something more nefarious behind it?